Maya Chen wasn't having the best day when the aliens decided to invade Earth. She'd already spilled coffee on her lab coat, discovered her experimental plasma generator had somehow achieved sentience and was now demanding workers' compensation, and received 3 separate noise complaints about her unnecessarily explosive chemical reactions. So when the massive crystalline ship descended from the clouds like some demented chandelier, casting shadows across the university campus, Maya's first reaction wasn't fear or wonder. It was annoyance. "Oh, come on," she shouted at the sky, throwing her safety goggles down on the concrete. "I've got a thesis defense in 2 hours." The ship settled onto quad with all the grace of a falling refrigerator, crushing the statue of some long-dead benefactor whose name nobody remembered anyway. Steam hissed from its landing thrusters, and Maya had to admit, grudgingly, that the engineering was impressive. Crystalline structures spiraled up its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and energy conduits pulsed with colors that definitely weren't in any human spectrum. Still didn't excuse the timing. Students were screaming and running in all directions, which Maya found rather dramatic. Professor Williams was standing in his office window, pointing frantically at emergency protocols taped to the glass. The campus security guard, Bob, was talking rapidly into his radio while backing toward the parking lot at a speed that suggested his retirement couldn't come fast enough. Maya, meanwhile, was calculating blast radii. The ship's main airlock cycled open with a sound like breaking wind mixed with a tuning fork, and out stepped what could generously be called the universe's most disappointing welcome committee. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished obsidian and too many joints in all the wrong places. His head was elongated, tapering to a point that made him look like someone had stretched his skull in Photoshop. Multiple eyes blinked at random intervals along his cranium, which was either intimidating or nauseating, depending on your tolerance for biological asymmetry. Behind him marched a dozen smaller creatures that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a filing cabinet. Their movements were precise, mechanical, and utterly devoid of personality. Maya folded her arms and waited. The lead alien raised what might have been an arm, though it bent in 3 places, and ended in something resembling a bunch of angry bananas. When he spoke, his voice boomed across the campus with all the warmth of a tax audit. "Primitive creatures of this pathetic mudball," he announced, apparently unaware that public speaking wasn't his strong suit. "I am Commander Vexith of the Dominion Fleet. Your species has been judged inferior and marked for harvesting." Maya glanced at her watch. "Thesis defense in 1 hour, 57 minutes. Resistance is futile." Vexith continued, warming to his theme. "Your leaders will submit to our authority, or we will demonstrate the consequences of defiance." A news helicopter circled overhead, its rotors beating against the alien ship's energy field, and creating a light show that was probably giving someone epilepsy. Maya could see the reporter gesticulating wildly at her cameraman, no doubt crafting tomorrow's headline. "Local university becomes ground zero for worst Tuesday ever." Professor Williams had apparently overcome his terror, and was now taking photographs with his phone, presumably for publication in the Journal of Xenobiology, assuming there was still a journal to publish in after today. Vexith's multiple eyes fixed on Maya, who was still standing there with her arms folded, looking like she was waiting for a particularly slow bus. "You," he boomed, pointing his banana cluster appendage at her. "Female specimen. Approach and demonstrate your species submission." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You heard the command, primitive." Vexith's voice carried harmonics that suggested he was used to being obeyed without question. "Kneel before the might of the Dominion." Maya looked around the quad. Most of the students had fled, though a few were live streaming from behind trees and buildings. Bob, the security guard, had reached his car and was fumbling with his keys like his life depended on it, which it probably did. She looked back at Vexith, who was standing there like a monument to bad design choices, waiting for her to collapse in terror. Instead, she laughed, not a nervous laugh or hysterical laugh, but the kind of laugh you make when someone tells you they've invented a perpetual motion machine using rubber bands and good intentions. "Oh, honey," she said, shaking her head. "You picked the wrong planet." Vexith's eyes blinked in sequence, like a confused Christmas light display. "What did you say?" "I said you picked the wrong planet." Maya's voice carried easily across the quad, clear and conversational. See, most species in the galaxy probably evolved on nice, safe worlds with predictable weather and reasonable gravity, and maybe 2 or 3 apex predators, tops. Places where being the biggest, scariest thing around actually means something. She started walking toward the ship, her hands clasped behind her back like she was taking a casual stroll through a park. But Earth. She grinned, and there was something in that expression that made Vexith take an involuntary step backward. Earth is what we call a Deathworld. Everything here is trying to kill everything else, all the time, in increasingly creative ways. We got weather patterns that can level cities, animals that hunt in packs and use tools, plants that are actively venomous, and geological activity that reshapes continents just for fun. Vexith was trying to process this information, his elongated skull tilting at angles that suggested his brain wasn't quite keeping up. And humans, Maya continued, still walking, still smiling. We're not just survivors of this charming hellscape. We're the apex predator, the thing that everything else learned to be afraid of. We hunt other hunters for sport. We eat things that are literally on fire. We weaponized everything from pointy sticks to the fundamental forces of the universe. She was close enough now that she could see her reflection in Vexith's obsidian skin, multiplied across his various eyes like a funhouse mirror. So when you stand there and tell me, kneel, she said, her voice dropping to a conversational whisper that somehow carried more menace than Vexith's amplified roaring. What you're really doing is challenging a member of the only species crazy enough to think that living on a planet where everything wants to kill us sounds like fun. Vexith finally found his voice again. You dare to threaten the Dominion? I have conquered 17 worlds. I have crushed civilizations beneath Maya moved. She didn't just move fast. She moved with the kind of speed and precision that comes from growing up on a world where hesitation means becoming someone else's lunch. Her right hand shot forward, fingers rigid, driving up under what she assumed was Vexith's equivalent of a rib cage. Her left hand grabbed the back of his elongated skull and pulled down while her knee came up to meet it. The sound of alien bone breaking was surprisingly similar to breaking human bone, just with a slightly different harmonic resonance. Vexith folded around her knee like a closing jackknife, his various eyes rolling in different directions as his nervous system tried to process the fact that he'd just been disabled by something a quarter his size and mass. Mid-sentence, Maya observed, straightening up and brushing dust off her lab coat. I hate when people don't let me finish my thoughts. The mantis filing cabinet creatures were raising weapons that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd heard about guns but had never actually seen one. Maya glanced at them, then at the ship behind them, then at her watch. 1 hour, 53 minutes. Right, she said, cracking her knuckles. Anyone else want to discuss conquest protocols? The news helicopter was getting some excellent footage. Vexith was making sounds that suggested his species had some very colorful profanity, though most of it was being filtered through what seemed to be significant respiratory distress. Maya walked over to the nearest mantis creature and examined its weapon with professional interest. The alien backed away, chittering something that her universal translator would have rendered as variations on "please don't hurt me" if she'd had a universal translator, which she didn't, because humans hadn't gotten that far yet. She held out her hand. Let me see that. The creature looked at its weapon, then at Maya, then at Vexith, who was still folded up like a broken lawn chair and offering no guidance on current protocol. It handed her the weapon. Maya turned it over in her hands, noting the power coupling and what appeared to be a safety mechanism designed by someone with too many fingers. Plasma discharge, probably around 1500 degrees Celsius, magnetically contained projectile. She mused, then pointed at the sky and pulled what she hoped was a trigger. A bolt of superheated gas screamed upward, leaving a trail of ionized air that smelled like ozone and regret. Nice engineering, she admitted. Inefficient power consumption, though, and your safety protocols are terrible. This thing could blow up in your face if you're not careful. She handed it back to the increasingly confused alien, then walked over to examine the ship. The hull was definitely crystalline, but not naturally grown. Someone had manufactured this using techniques that made human materials science look like finger painting. The energy conduits pulsed with what appeared to be controlled antimatter reactions, and the gravitational distortion field was sophisticated enough to make Einstein weep with joy. "Commander Vexith," she called back to the pile of alien that had been threatening conquest moments earlier. "Your ship is beautiful work. Whoever designed your power systems is a genuine artist. But your military doctrine needs work." Vexith managed to raise his head enough to glare at her with 3 of his functional eyes. What are you?" Maya grinned again, that same expression that had made him step backward earlier. "I'm Maya Chen," she said. "I'm a graduate student in theoretical physics, specializing in exotic matter interactions and practical applications of controlled fusion reactions. I've been living on this planet for 26 years, which means I've survived approximately 9,490 days of everything it could throw at me." She gestured at the campus around them, where students were starting to emerge from their hiding spots with smartphones at the ready. "And I've got a thesis defense in 1 hour and 50 minutes that I've been preparing for since I was 12 years old. So if you want to discuss conquest, you're going to have to wait until after I get my doctorate." Vexith tried to straighten up, failed, and settled for making more of those colorful alien profanities. "Besides," Maya continued, walking back toward the administration building, "you really should have done your homework before coming here. Earth isn't just a death world. It's our death world. We know all the tricks." She paused at the building entrance and looked back at the confused alien invasion force. "Also, our internet is terrible and our customer service is worse. Trust me, you don't want to conquer this place. The paperwork alone would kill you." And with that, she disappeared into the building, leaving behind one severely injured alien commander, a dozen very confused subordinates, and enough smartphone footage to keep the internet busy for years. Outside, sirens were beginning to wail as emergency services finally showed up to deal with whatever this was supposed to be. Maya Chen had a thesis to defend. The thing about defending your doctoral thesis when aliens have just landed on campus is that your committee suddenly develops a very different perspective on what constitutes an emergency reschedule. Maya discovered this when she arrived at the conference room to find Professor Williams, Dr. Santos, and Professor Kim all huddled around a laptop, frantically refreshing news feeds and making the kind of worried sounds that academics make when reality intrudes on their carefully structured worldview. "Maya," Professor Williams looked up as she entered, his normally pristine hair sticking up at angles that suggested he'd been running his hands through it. "Thank God you're alive. We saw the footage. We thought, how did you—" "Simple biomechanics," Maya replied, setting her laptop and presentation materials on the conference table with the same calm she'd use for any other Tuesday. "Humanoid skeletal structures have predictable weak points. Plus, he was monologuing, which always leave you open to counterattack. Dr. Santos, a typically unflappable woman who'd spent 30 years studying theoretical xenobiology without ever expecting to encounter actual xenobiology, was staring at Maya like she'd sprouted additional limbs. "You attacked an alien," she said slowly. "An 8-foot-tall alien with weapons." He started it. Maya pointed out reasonably. "Besides, his tactical assessment was terrible. You don't announce conquest plans to a potentially hostile species without proper reconnaissance. Any first-year military history student could tell you that." Professor Kim, who normally looked like he'd rather be anywhere else during thesis defenses, was leaning forward with genuine interest for the first time in Maya's memory. "The news is saying you broke his spine," he said. "Is that accurate?" Maya shrugged, probably more like severe compression trauma to his central nervous cluster. "I didn't have time for a detailed anatomical assessment." Outside the conference room windows, they could see the alien ship still sitting on a quad like the world's most expensive paperweight. Emergency vehicles surrounded it, their lights painting the crystalline hull in rotating patterns of red and blue. Hazmat teams were setting up perimeters while military personnel established command posts that looked suspiciously like they'd been planned for this exact scenario. "Are we still doing the defense?" Maya asked, opening her laptop. "Because I've spent 4 years on this research, and I'm not letting first contact derail my graduation timeline." The 3 professors exchanged glances that carried several years' worth of academic conversation compressed into a single moment. "The university has been placed under emergency protocols," Professor Williams said carefully. All non-essential activities are suspended pending. This is essential, Maya interrupted. At least to me, and possibly to them. She nodded toward the window, where Vexith's subordinates were apparently attempting some kind of medical procedure involving crystals and devices that hummed at frequencies that made the building's windows vibrate. Dr. Santos raised an eyebrow. Them? Maya pulled up her presentation slides, which featured equations that looked like someone had taught calculus to fight itself and won. My thesis focuses on controlled manipulation of exotic matter, using localized gravitational fields, she explained. Specifically, the theoretical applications for faster-than-light travel, energy generation, and defensive systems. You know, the kind of technology that might be useful if Earth suddenly found itself dealing with interstellar neighbors who think conquest is an acceptable hobby. Professor Kim was reading over her shoulder now, his expression shifting from politely skeptical to genuinely intrigued to slightly alarmed. Maya, he said slowly, some of these applications could revolutionize human technology and possibly give us a fighting chance against species that have been playing in the galactic sandbox longer than we have. Maya finished. Yes, that occurred to me too. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a three-dimensional model of something that looked like it belonged on the alien ship outside. I may have been working with some unconventional energy sources. Professor Williams nearly choked on his coffee. Unconventional how? Maya's grin was the same one she'd worn while explaining Earth's Deathworld status to Commander Vexith. Well, you know that plasma generator in Lab 7? The one that achieved sentience and started demanding workers' compensation. Yes, that wasn't an accident. The silence that followed was the kind that academics use to process information that fundamentally restructures their understanding of reality. It's a specialized silence, different from the regular surprise silence that normal people use, because academics have had more practice being wrong about important things. Dr. Santos recovered first. You created artificial intelligence. As a byproduct of manipulating exotic matter fields. Yes. Turns out consciousness might be an emergent property of sufficiently complex energy patterns. Who knew? Maya clicked to another slide. The real breakthrough was when I realized the same principles could be applied to faster-than-light communication and travel. Maya. Professor Kim said in the tone professors use when they're trying very hard not to panic. Do you realize what you're describing? A functional basis for interstellar civilization, probably. Also the foundation for defensive technologies that could protect Earth from species that think conquest is a reasonable foreign policy. She paused. Oh, and maybe the key to understanding how their ships work. As if on cue, there was a commotion outside. Through the conference room windows, they could see Vexith attempting to stand upright, supported by two of his Mantis filing cabinet subordinates. His multiple eyes were focused on the administration building with what appeared to be murderous intent, though it was hard to be sure given the alien facial structure. I think he's looking for me, Maya observed. Professor Williams was rapidly approaching the academic equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Maya, you can't just... This is first contact with an alien species. There are protocols, international committees. The United Nations has an entire department for this. Do they have a department for theoretical physics applications? Maya asked, because that seems more immediately relevant. Primitive female. Vexith's voice boomed across the campus, amplified by the same technology he'd used for his earlier conquest speech. You will answer for your assault on a Dominion commander. Maya looked at her thesis committee. So, are we doing this defense or not? Because either way, I probably need to go deal with Mr. Personality out there before he decides to demonstrate his superior firepower on university property. Dr. Santos was reading through Maya's research notes with the kind of focus intensity she usually reserved for grant applications. These calculations, she said without looking up, they're not just theoretical, are they? The plasma generator that achieved consciousness was my proof of concept. Yes. Everything else follows from there. Maya saved her presentation and closed the laptop. Look, I can explain the details later, but right now I've got an angry alien commander who's probably going to escalate the situation unless someone explains basic human psychology to him. Basic human psychology? Professor Kim echoed. He's operating under the assumption that humans are a typical prey species that will submit when faced with superior force, Maya explained, heading for the door. He hasn't figured out yet that humans respond to threats by getting creative about threat elimination. She paused in the doorway. Also, his species probably evolved as pack hunters with clear dominance hierarchies. When I took him down, I didn't just hurt him physically. I challenged his entire understanding of where he fits in the cosmic food chain. And that means, Professor Williams asked weakly. Maya's grin was starting to worry her thesis committee. It means he's going to keep escalating until either he reestablishes dominance or someone explains to him why that's a bad idea. Female, I know you can hear me. Vexith's voice was getting closer. Emerge and face the consequences of your actions. Right, Maya said. Be back in a few minutes. Try not to panic while I'm gone. She left the conference room, walked down the hallway, and emerged from the administration building to find Vexith standing about 20 feet away, flanked by his subordinates and looking like 8 feet of barely contained alien rage. His eyes fixed on her immediately. There you are, primitive creature. You will now experience the price of defying the Dominion. Maya looked around. The emergency personnel had pulled back to what they probably considered a safe distance, which meant they clearly didn't understand the physics involved in the weapons the aliens were carrying. News helicopters circled overhead, and she could see that someone had set up a live stream station behind one of the emergency vehicles. Commander Vexith, she said conversationally, I've been thinking about our earlier conversation, and I realize we got off on the wrong foot. You attacked the Dominion commander. Vexith snarled. There is no recovering from such an insult. See, that's where you're making a cultural assumption, Maya replied. In human society, when someone threatens us with violence, we consider that an invitation to demonstrate why that's a poor life choice. She started walking toward him again, the same casual pace she'd used earlier. But I understand the confusion. Your species probably has complex social hierarchies based on displays of dominance and submission, right? Biggest, scariest individual gets to make the decisions. Everyone else falls in line. Vexith's eyes were blinking in that same confused Christmas light pattern. The strong rule the weak. This is a natural order. Right, except humans don't really do natural order, Maya continued. We do unnatural order. We take the natural order out back and beat it to death with tools we invented specifically for beating things to death more efficiently. She was close enough now that Vexith could have reached out and grabbed her, if he'd been fast enough, and if his spine wasn't still sending very unhappy signals to his nervous system. You see, Commander, humans aren't impressive because we're the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. We're impressive because we're the species that looked at a world full of things that want to kill us and decided that wasn't good enough. We wanted things that wanted to kill us more creatively. Maya stopped directly in front of Vexith, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. So when you stand there and threaten conquest, what you're really doing is offering us a new and interesting challenge. And humans love challenges. You speak as though your primitive species could threaten the Dominion, Vexith said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Maya smiled, and this time her expression carried the weight of 4 billion years of evolutionary pressure applied to a species that had learned to hunt fear itself. Commander Vexith, she said softly, I'm a graduate student in theoretical physics. I spend my time thinking about how to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. For fun, she gestured at the campus around them. This is a university. We got about 40,000 students here, studying everything from ancient history to quantum mechanics to bioengineering. And this is just one university, on one continent, on one planet full of humans who think that figuring out how to do impossible things is a reasonable way to spend their time. Vexith was starting to look like he was rethinking some major life choices. Now, Maya continued, you can keep threatening us with conquest, and we'll keep showing you why that's not going to work out the way you expect. Or you can sit down, shut up, and let us explain how first contact is actually supposed to work when one of the species involved isn't interested in being conquered. She paused. Your choice, Commander. But choose quickly, because I still have a thesis defense to finish, and I'm running out of patience for cosmic-scale temper tantrums. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of news helicopters and the distant hum of alien technology. Finally, Commander Vexith of the Dominion Fleet, conqueror of 17 worlds, crusher of civilizations, sat down heavily on the grass and put his elongated head in his hands. "What?" he asked in a voice that suggested he was questioning every decision he'd ever made. "Is a thesis defense?" Maya Chen grinned and checked her watch. 47 minutes to go. Pull up a chair. "Commander, you're about to get a crash course in human education, and possibly in why threatening a planet full of curious apes with opposable thumbs and doctoral programs was the worst idea you've had since you decided conquest was a viable career path." The news helicopters got some excellent footage of humanity's first intergalactic academic presentation. It would later be remembered as the moment when the galaxy learned that humans don't just survive on death worlds. They turn death worlds into universities.